The first time I told this story, back on Omega 7's medical deck with 3 broken ribs and a memory full of gaps, nobody believed the ending. I've told it 40 times since, to cadets who go pale and captains who go quiet, and I still start the same place. Not the classroom, not the alarm. The door. We had it barricaded with a supply cabinet, 4 crates of reagent bottles, and whatever hope a person can wedge under a handle. 11 of us breathed in that dark lab, listening to something in the corridor make a sound like a glacier carving. Then the door simply came apart, not broken, not forced, just unmade, its bolts letting go all at once like they'd finally agreed on something. Red emergency light poured through the gap, along with a shape that had too many joints and not enough edges. And the smallest person in the room stepped forward holding a pen. To understand how we got there, you have to go back 6 hours, to a morning so ordinary it makes my scales itch remembering it. I taught combat theory at the Galactic Defense Academy, 4 arms, a service record spanning 17 systems, and a classroom full of students who'd rather be anywhere else. Trixie Moonbend flushed crimson every time I looked at her. Kaz Ironspike solved every hypothetical with a bigger club. And in the back corner, as always, sat Marcus Webb, a human built like an afterthought, scribbling in a notebook while the rest of the galaxy tried to figure out what he was for. That morning I lectured on apex predators, adaptability over strength, the shadow maw of Kepler that hunts between dimensions, when Webb spoke up unprompted, the way he almost never did. He asked about persistence hunters, creatures too slow and too weak to win a straight fight, who simply refused to stop. I told him it was a quaint theory with no place in real combat. He nodded, went back to his notebook, and I forgot about it within the hour. The alarm that cut my lecture short wasn't a drill. Through the reinforced glass, I watched the station's shields gutter out one by one, and something enormous moved against the stars where nothing should have been moving at all. Command's voice on the comm was tighter than I'd heard it in years. Multiple hostiles. Unknown species. Fast. I split my class into a moving formation toward the bunker, Trixie scouting. Kaz on our flank, Webb tucked in the middle where I assumed he'd cause the least trouble. We found Lieutenant Thrace before we found the enemy. A Zenurian who could bench press a hover sled, opened along seams too clean to be an accident, like something had unzipped him out of professional curiosity rather than hunger. Then we saw what did it. 3 of them, filling the corridor ahead, bodies flickering between solid and absence, teeth like a jar of broken glass caught in the wrong light. I hissed for a retreat. Kaz heard something else. He went in swinging both clubs, screaming loud enough to shake the walls, and the nearest hunter simply wasn't where it had been a heartbeat before. It was beside him instead. Kaz left the ground already gone, and the wall caught what was left. I have buried friends across 17 systems. I have never managed to unhear that sound. We ran. We barricaded ourselves in the materials lab, 11 survivors, and a comm array we couldn't reach. That's the door I opened this story on. Unless that's a phase cannon, Webb put it away. It's worked before, he said, and clicked the tip once. The first hunter through the wreckage went straight for Trixie, who had gone transparent with fear, not knowing these things read a spectrum she didn't have. Webb stepped into its path before I could grab him. 10 feet of shifting, Nightmare looked down at 130 pounds of unimpressed human, and Webb told it, plainly, that if it wanted her, it would have to get past him first. It laughed, I'm certain that's the word, and lunged fast enough to open him collarbone to hip. He wasn't there when the claws arrived. One small shift of weight, almost lazy, and the creature sailed past overextended. He pressed the pen to a point on its shoulder that had no business existing on a body built from shadow, and the air made a sound like a breath finally released. It didn't die. It stopped, the way a held frame stops, and never moved again. The other 2 came together, coordinated, furious. He didn't fight them so much as become the space they needed and weren't allowed to occupy. One caught him with a glancing hit that split 3 lines across his chest, and he looked down at the blood with something closer to interest than pain, and told it, without raising his voice, that it had just made a costly mistake. The last one died trying to run. When it was over, he stood turning the pen in his fingers, breathing barely, faster than normal. What exactly are you? I asked. Sophomore, he said. Xenobiology, minor in comparative lit. Then, seeing my face, I'm human, sir, just human. I didn't believe him. I still don't, entirely. He said the evacuation routes would only feed them. That fear was the meal these things hunted hardest for, and every fleeing survivor was one more course walking toward its own end. So instead of retreating further, he led us toward the herding calls, humming under his breath like a man headed to a picnic. From a rail above the central plaza, we counted 20 of them, driving a crowd of staff and students into a tight, terrified knot. Trixie said what all of us were thinking, that he might handle 3, never 20. 20's perfect, he said, and went over the railing. He dropped 40 feet and landed like it cost him nothing. Every hunter in the plaza turned toward the small thing that had just announced itself. He spoke to them the way I'd correct a first year who'd missed an obvious tactic, and the largest of them answered that they had unmade civilizations, that soft flesh had no claim over the children of the void. I could show you otherwise, he said, and moved. I've watched Zentauran battle dancers and crystalline duelists, and none of it prepared me for this. He walked, unhurried, and the ones who reached him first learned that he wasn't reacting to their attacks. He was already standing where each attack would end. He talked while he worked, calm as a lecture, telling them that living partly outside normal space made a creature predictable, that patience was a weapon nothing in this galaxy had ever thought to arm itself against. 20 became 15, became 5, became none, and the plaza fell silent except for one small click as a pen folded shut. The rescue fleet's admiral came over the comm within the hour, demanding to know who had contained an incursion of that scale. I told him the truth. A sophomore, xenobiology major, no formal combat rating. The silence on the other end lasted long enough that I thought we'd lost the channel. Afterward, once the medics had finished, and the survivors had stopped staring at Webb like something out of scripture, I asked him where his species actually sat in the food chain. He thought about it a long time. Every ecosystem needs something that isn't trying to win the chain, he said, just trying to keep whatever's on top from getting comfortable there. He shrugged, like he was reciting coursework. They killed kids who were just trying to learn something. That's what happens when something forgets its place. Within the week, the Academy issued a quiet new regulation. Any phase hunter sighting was to be reported to the Human Diplomatic Corps, not for assistance, the notice specified, but as a courtesy, so no one hunted in someone else's territory by mistake. Marcus went back to his seat in the corner the following Monday, notebook open, hand raised at all the right moments, answering questions about predator psychology in the same unhurried voice as always. I still teach the same unit every term. But now, when a quiet student in the back keeps something small and ordinary lined up on their desk, a stapler, a pen, a paperclip turned end over end, without them seeming to notice, I no longer read it as nothing. I let the silence sit a moment longer than I used to, and I move on to the next slide.